I felt something was wrong in my own home, so I faked a trip to visit my sister in Boston. While I was watching the situation from across the street, my elderly neighbor Moses suddenly approached and tapped my shoulder, saying, "Wait until Friday midnight, Samantha. You'll discover everything." When that clock struck 12, my breath stopped at what I saw. But let me explain how I got to that point, how a 64-year-old woman ended up hiding in her neighbor's house, spying on her own home as if she were a criminal. Because what I discovered that night didn't just destroy my trust in my family. It showed me just how far the people you love can go when greed takes control of their hearts. My name is Samantha Rose Mitchell. This house where I've lived for the last 40 years in Queens, New York, is my sanctuary, my history, my entire life, built with effort alongside my late husband, David. Every corner here holds our memories. The kitchen where we prepared Sunday morning pancakes while jazz played softly on the radio. The living room where we watched our son Jaden grow from a crawling baby into a man. The garden we cultivated with our own hands, David teaching me which roses needed more sun, which hydrangeas preferred shade. When David died 7 years ago from a sudden heart attack right there in our master bedroom in my arms. At 3:47 in the morning, I thought I might die too. The grief was a physical thing, heavy as stones in my chest. For months, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room. I moved to the smaller guest bedroom down the hall, and I converted our master bedroom into storage. I couldn't bear to see the space where I'd lost him. That's when Jaden insisted on moving here with his wife, Zoe. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone at this age." He told me, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes. David's eyes filled with what I thought was genuine concern. "Let us move in. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of the house." At the time, I thought it was filial love. I thought it was kindness. How naive I was. The first few months were quiet, almost happy. We ate dinner together at the old oak table David had refinished himself. We talked about Jaden's work as an accountant, about Zoe's ambitions to start her own event planning business. We laughed. Zoe was attentive, even affectionate. She helped me with grocery shopping, navigating her sleek sedan through the Queens traffic I'd started to find intimidating. She cooked my favorite meals, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like I used to make, and creamy mashed potatoes with real butter. Jaden fixed things around the house that had broken down. The leaky faucet in the second bathroom, the loose railing on the front porch steps, the temperamental garage door that David had always promised to repair but never got around to. I thought, what a blessing to have my family close in my old age. I thought I was lucky. I should have known better. I should have remembered that in this life, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. It was about 4 months ago when something shifted. It was subtle at first, so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining things, that my age was playing tricks on me, that loneliness was making me paranoid. But the whispers were real. It started with the conversations that would stop abruptly whenever I entered a room. I'd be coming down the hallway, my footsteps quiet on the carpet runner, and I'd hear their voices from the kitchen, urgent, low, intense. The moment I stepped through the doorway, silence would fall like a curtain. Jaden would quickly put away his phone with a swift, almost guilty motion, the screen going dark before I could see what he'd been looking at. Zoe would change the subject with a tense smile, her jaw tight. "What were you talking about?" I would ask them, trying to keep my voice light, casual, as if I hadn't noticed the sudden shift. "Nothing important, Mom," Jaden would reply without looking me in the eye, his attention suddenly very focused on his coffee mug. "Just boring work stuff," Zoe would add with that sweet voice that was starting to sound hollow to me, like a bell with a crack in it. Then I noticed other details. Small things. Things that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The door to my old master bedroom, the one I had converted into storage after David's death, was always locked now. Before it had remained open, the door slightly ajar, morning light filtering through the curtains I hadn't changed in 7 years. Now, whenever I walked past, the door was firmly closed, and I could hear the click of a lock that hadn't been there before. "Why do you lock that room?" I asked one day, standing in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob that wouldn't turn. Zoe responded too quickly, her words tumbling out. "It's just that there's a moisture problem, Samantha. We noticed some water damage on the ceiling. We don't want your things to get damaged, all those boxes of David's belongings. We're just being careful." But I didn't remember giving permission for them to touch that room. I didn't remember any conversation about moisture or water damage. And our roof was solid. David had it replaced just 2 years before he died. When I walked down the hall at night, going to the bathroom or unable to sleep, I heard strange noises coming from behind that locked door. Footsteps that weren't Jaden's or Zoe's lighter, quicker. Muffled voices speaking in tones too low to make out words. Laughter that belonged to strangers. And then there was the night that changed everything. It was close to 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. I'd gone to bed early with a book, a mystery novel I wasn't really reading, just staring at the pages while my mind wandered. Sleep had been elusive lately, my thoughts circling like birds that couldn't find a place to land. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening. We had an old door original to the house, solid oak with brass fixtures that David had polished every spring. It had a particular creak, a specific sound I'd heard thousands of times over 40 years. I knew that sound the way you know the voice of someone you love. I got out of bed carefully, my joints protesting arthritis in my knees, a reminder that I wasn't young anymore, though my mind still felt sharp as ever. I put on my robe and walked carefully to the hallway, making sure not to make a sound, keeping to the edges of the floorboards where they didn't creak. From my bedroom doorway, I could see down the hall to the entrance foyer. I saw Zoe standing there in designer loungewear that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, receiving a young woman I'd never seen before. The woman looked to be in her mid-20s, carrying a small rolling suitcase and a backpack. They spoke in whispers, but I could see the transaction clearly. The young woman reached into her purse, expensive leather with gold hardware, and handed something over. Cash, I realized. A thick fold of bills. Zoe took it, quickly counted it with practiced efficiency, and tucked it into the pocket of her pants. Then she guided the woman down the hall, directly toward that locked room. That room that supposedly had a moisture problem. I heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. The door opened and yellow light spilled out into the dark hallway, warm, inviting light that meant someone had been in there recently keeping it ready. And then the door closed again with a soft click. I stood there in the darkness of my doorway, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. My hands were shaking. Someone, a complete stranger, had just paid my daughter-in-law cash to stay in my house. In my home. In the room where my husband had died. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the wall where David's photo hung the two of us on our 25th anniversary, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something I could no longer remember. "What would you do?" I whispered to the photograph. But David, as always, now had no answers for me. The next morning during breakfast, I didn't mention anything. I only observed. The kitchen was filled with morning light, the same light that had streamed through these windows for 40 years. I'd made coffee in the same pot David and I had received as a wedding gift, the porcelain slightly chipped now, but still functional. Zoe was already at the table, scrolling through her phone with one hand while sipping from a mug with the other. She looked up when I entered and smiled, that perfect, practiced smile that I was beginning to recognize as a mask. "Good morning, Samantha. Did you sleep well?" I poured myself coffee, my hand steady despite the turmoil inside. "Very well, thank you. And you?" "Like a baby," she said, and there wasn't even a flicker in her expression, not a hint of guilt or discomfort. Jaden came down a few minutes later, already dressed for work in his gray suit, the one I'd helped him pick out for his job interview 3 years ago. He kissed the top of my head absently as he passed, grabbing a piece of toast from the plate on the counter. "Morning, Mom. Sleep okay?" "Just fine, honey," I lied, watching him carefully. "How about you? I thought I heard some noise last night. Did you have trouble sleeping?" He didn't even pause in his chewing. "Nope. Slept great. Maybe it was the neighbors." The neighbors. In a house with walls thick enough that we rarely heard anything from next door. In a house where I knew every sound, every creak, every settling timber. They were both liars. Both of them were lying to my face with the ease of people who'd done it many times before. I sat at the table with them, sipping my coffee, making small talk about the weather, about Jaden's upcoming project at work, about Zoe's plans to meet a friend for lunch. All the while, my mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How many strangers had slept in my house in David's room without my knowledge? How much money had they made from this secret business they were running under my roof? And more importantly, what else were they hiding? That afternoon when Jaden left for work and Zoe went out for her supposed lunch with a friend, I made my decision. I stood in front of that locked door, my hand on the knob that wouldn't turn. I had my own set of keys, of course. This was my house. Every door, every lock, every corner of this property belonged to me legally, left to me in David's will, with no ambiguity, no shared ownership. I tried my master key first, the one that had always opened this door. It didn't work. I tried it again, thinking maybe I'd used the wrong key, but I knew this was the right one. The key that had opened this door for 40 years. The lock had been changed. They had changed the lock on a room in my own house without telling me, without asking permission, without even a conversation about it. I stood there in the hallway, and I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't anger yet. It was colder than anger, sharper. It was clarity. My hand went to my chest where my heart was pounding hard. The rage began to boil, slowly building like water heating on a stove, but I pushed it down. Rage solves nothing, I reminded myself. Rage only clouds judgment. I needed to think clearly now. I needed to be smart. If they were hiding something behind this door, and they clearly were, I needed to discover what it was without them suspecting that I knew. I needed evidence. I needed to understand the full scope of whatever they were doing. And suddenly it occurred to me. A plan formed in my mind, complete and ready. I would fake a trip. I would tell them I was visiting my sister Anne in Boston. I would leave them alone, make them think they had free reign of my house. And I would watch from a distance to see what they did when they thought I wasn't around. That's when I thought of Moses. Moses Whitmore lived right across the street from my house. He was 72 years old, a widower like me. His wife Patricia had died of cancer 5 years ago. We'd been neighbors since David and I had built this house 40 years ago, when Moses and Patricia were newlyweds themselves, young and full of hope. Over the decades, we'd shared everything: block parties and borrowed lawn mowers, coffee on difficult mornings and champagne on celebratory evenings. He'd been at David's funeral, standing in the rain without an umbrella, crying openly in a way that made me love him even more. From his second-floor window, Moses had a direct view of my front entrance. If anyone could tell me what had been happening at my house, it would be him. I walked across the street that afternoon, the October air crisp and cool, leaves crunching under my feet. Moses opened the door before I even knocked. He must have seen me coming through his front window. "Samantha," he said, and something in his face told me he'd been expecting this conversation. "Come in." His house smelled like coffee and old books, comfortable and familiar. We sat in his kitchen at the same formica table where Patricia used to serve her famous apple pie. He poured me iced tea from a pitcher in his refrigerator, his hands shaking slightly as he set the glass in front of me. "Moses," I began, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He sat down across from me, his weathered face serious. "I've been wanting to talk to you for weeks, Samantha, but I didn't know if I should get involved. I didn't want to worry you without being sure." My stomach dropped. "What have you seen?" He sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging. "For about 3 weeks now, maybe a month, I've noticed strange things at your house. People coming and going at odd hours, always at night, always with suitcases or backpacks. Sometimes they're young women, sometimes couples. Never the same people. They arrive in taxis and Ubers and private cars. Zoe receives them at the door. They talk briefly and then they go inside. The next day, early in the morning, before most of the neighborhood is awake, they leave." I felt the room tilt slightly. "Every night. Not every night, but most nights, especially on weekends. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, those seem to be the busiest." He paused, looking down at his gnarled hands. "Last week I saw something else. I saw Zoe accepting cash at the door from a middle-aged couple. She counted it right there on your front porch, bold as brass, and then let them in." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Moses's eyes filled with regret. "Because I hoped I was wrong, Samantha. Because I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe they were friends of Jaden's, I thought. Maybe family of Zoe's who needed temporary lodging. But when I saw the money changing hands last week, I knew. This is a business, and a business done in secret is never an honest business." He leaned forward, his voice dropping even though we were alone in his house. "Samantha, I think they're using your house as an illegal hotel, some kind of short-term rental operation, and I don't think you have any idea it's happening." The world seemed to narrow to this moment, this kitchen, this truth I'd been afraid to face. "There's something else," Moses continued, his face troubled. 2 weeks ago, I saw Zoe meeting with someone at the coffee shop on the corner. It was a Wednesday afternoon around 3 o'clock. The man was older, maybe 55, well-dressed in an expensive suit. He carried a leather briefcase like a lawyer or a doctor would carry. "What about him?" They talked for almost an hour. I was at the next table doing the crossword puzzle. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop Samantha, but some words carried. Words I couldn't ignore. My hands gripped the edge of the table. "What words, Moses?" He swallowed hard before answering. "I heard documents. I heard mental competency. I heard medical evaluation. And I heard nursing home." The kitchen went completely silent except for the ticking of the clock on Moses's wall, the same clock that had been there for 30 years. Mental competency, medical evaluation, nursing home. Those words hung in the air like poison gas. "Are you absolutely sure about what you heard?" My voice was barely a whisper. Moses nodded slowly, his eyes full of sorrow and concern. "I've been losing sleep over it, Samantha, wondering if I should tell you, wondering if I misunderstood, but I know what I heard." I sat there in Moses's kitchen for a long time, my iced tea growing warm, the ice melting into water. My mind was working, fitting pieces together like a puzzle I'd been too close to see clearly. They weren't just using my house to run an illegal business. They were planning something bigger, something that involved doctors and legal documents and nursing homes. They were planning to take everything from me, not just my money, not just my house, but my freedom itself. "Moses," I said finally, my voice steady now, clear with purpose. "I need your help." "Anything," he said immediately. "I'm going to fake a trip to visit my sister in Boston. I'm going to make Jaden and Zoe believe I'll be gone for a whole week. And I need you to let me stay here in your guest room where I can watch my house from your window." Moses didn't hesitate. "The room's yours. The second-floor bedroom has a perfect view of your front entrance and part of your living room through the windows. We'll see everything they do." I felt relief wash over me. Relief that I wasn't alone in this, that I had an ally, a witness. Someone who could confirm what my eyes saw so they couldn't later say I was confused or senile or suffering from the very mental decline they were apparently planning to fabricate. "There's one more thing," Moses said, standing up to pour himself more tea. "Wait until Friday midnight." "What happens Friday midnight?" "I've been watching patterns, Samantha. Fridays are different. There's more movement, more people, more activity. Whatever they're really doing, whatever the full scope of this operation is, Friday night is when you'll see it all. Wait until Friday midnight. You'll discover everything." His words echoed in my mind like a prophecy. Friday midnight, 2 days away. That evening, I returned to my house and began my own performance. I'd spent 40 years as a nurse working double shifts at the hospital, dealing with difficult patients and demanding doctors in life-or-death situations. I knew how to keep my face neutral, my voice calm, even when everything inside me was screaming. I'd learned to compartmentalize, to function under pressure. Now I would use those skills for myself. During dinner, chicken parmesan that Zoe had made using my recipe in my kitchen, I made my announcement. "I've decided to visit Anne in Boston," I said casually, cutting my chicken into neat pieces. "I haven't seen her in months and she's been asking me to come. I thought I'd go tomorrow and stay for a week." The reaction was immediate and telling. Jaden looked up from his plate, his eyes suddenly bright. Zoe stopped chewing for just a fraction of a second, then smiled a smile that was too wide, too enthusiastic, too relieved. "That's wonderful, Mom," Zoe said, reaching over to pat my hand. "It'll do you so much good to get out a bit, change the scenery." "Right, Jaden." My son nodded vigorously, his mouth still full. He swallowed quickly. "Absolutely, Mom. You deserve a break. And you and Aunt Anne always have such a good time together. We'll take care of the house. Don't worry about a thing." Don't worry about a thing. Those words resonated in my head with a sinister echo. Don't worry while we fill your house with strangers. Don't worry while we make money off your property. Don't worry while we plan to take everything from you. "You're so sweet to worry about the house," I said with a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. "But I do need you to water the plants in the garden every other day. You know how dry it's been. And please keep things tidy. You know I don't like clutter." Zoe nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Of course everything will be perfect when you return. Just perfect. You just enjoy your trip and relax." Perfect. They wanted me to leave. They needed me to leave. That only confirmed they were hiding something big. The next morning I did the whole performance. I took out my old suitcase from the hall closet, the brown leather one with the brass latches that David and I had used when we traveled to Maine for our 25th anniversary. I packed it methodically in the living room where Jaden and Zoe could see me sensible clothes, my toiletry bag, my medications. They needed to see those needed to be reminded I was an elderly woman with health concerns, my reading glasses. I called Anne on speakerphone from the living room, making sure my voice carried. "Yes, Annie, I'm heading out there today. I should arrive before lunch. No, Jaden's going to drive me to the bus terminal. Of course I'm excited. It's been too long." Anne, bless her, knew about the plan. I'd called her the night before and told her everything. She was furious. Those ungrateful leeches, she'd called them, and completely supportive. "You catch them in whatever they're doing, Sam, and then you make them pay." Jaden insisted on driving me to the Port Authority bus terminal. I'd expected that he wanted to make absolutely sure I was really leaving. "That's not necessary, honey," I said. "I can take a taxi." "Mom, I'm not letting you take a cab when I can drive you. It's no trouble at all." At the terminal, he walked me to the gate for the Boston bus, carrying my suitcase like the dutiful son. He hugged me, and for just a moment I let myself remember the little boy he used to be. The one who would climb into my lap when he had nightmares. The one who made me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings of flowers. The one who cried when I explained that Daddy wasn't coming home from the hospital. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into this man who could look me in the eyes and lie so easily? "Have a good trip, Mom," he set his hand on my shoulder. "Call us when you arrive so we know you're safe." I looked into his eyes, David's eyes, and searched for any trace of guilt, of remorse, of love. But all I saw was impatience. He wanted me to get on that bus. He wanted to see me leave. "I'll call you, sweetheart," I told him. And then I walked into the terminal, my suitcase rolling behind me, my back straight. I stood in the line for the Boston bus until Jaden left. I watched through the terminal windows until I saw his car pull away and disappear into Manhattan traffic. Then I turned around, walked out through a different exit, and hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. I gave him Moses's address. Moses had the guest room ready for me when I arrived. It was a small bedroom on the second floor, simply furnished with a double bed covered in a faded blue quilt, a nightstand, and a wooden chair. But the window was perfect. From here I had an unobstructed view of my house. I could see the front entrance clearly, the small front yard with its carefully maintained lawn. Jaden did keep it nice, I had to admit, and part of the living room through the front windows when the curtains were open. "I brought up a thermos of coffee," Moses said, setting it on the nightstand. "And there's a notebook and pen if you want to write things down. Document everything, Samantha. Dates, times, descriptions. If this goes to court, you'll need records." Court. The word sent a chill through me. Was it really going to come to that? I sat down in the wooden chair Moses had positioned by the window. It was comfortable enough, worn smooth by years of use. From here I could see my entire house, my sanctuary, my history, my home. "Now we wait," Moses said quietly, "and we watch." The first few hours were normal, painfully normal. Zoe left the house around 10 in the morning, dressed in yoga pants and a designer jacket, probably heading to the gym or one of her lunch dates. Jaden's car was already gone. He'd gone straight to work from dropping me off at the terminal. The house stood empty and quiet. I sat by that window and watched my home like it was a stranger's house, like I was conducting surveillance on enemy territory. And in a way I was. Moses brought me lunch, a turkey sandwich and homemade tomato soup. We ate together in that small bedroom, talking in low voices even though there was no one to overhear us. "How long have you been noticing the suspicious activity?" I asked him. He thought for a moment. "The first time I saw someone who definitely wasn't family enter your house at night was about 3 or 4 months ago. It was just one person, a young man with a backpack. I thought maybe it was a friend of Jaden's staying over. But then it happened again a few days later. Different person. And again. And then I started paying more attention. 3 or 4 months. All this time while I lived under the same roof they'd been operating this secret business. Every time I went to bed early, every time I visited a friend, every time I was out of the house, they'd been bringing strangers into my home. As the afternoon light began to fade into evening, I saw movement. It was around 6 o'clock when a silver Toyota Camry pulled up in front of my house. 2 people got out, a young couple maybe in their early 30s. They each carried rolling suitcases and backpacks. The woman was wearing a puffy jacket and jeans. The man had a camera bag slung over his shoulder. Zoe opened the front door before they even had a chance to knock. I watched as she greeted them with a professional smile, the kind of smile a hotel concierge might give. She was wearing different clothes now she'd changed from her yoga outfit into nice slacks and a sweater like she was ready to receive guests. The three of them talked on the front porch for less than a minute. I could see their breath in the cool October air, little clouds of white. Then the man reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Even from across the street, I could see him counting bills. He handed the cash to Zoe. She took it with practiced ease, counted it quickly, her fingers moving with the speed of someone who'd done this many times before, and then slipped it into her pocket. Then she invited them inside with a sweep of her arm like a hostess welcoming visitors. The door closed behind them. I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. My hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles went white. I had just watched my daughter-in-law accept cash payment from strangers and invite them into my house, into my home. The home I'd built with David, where we'd raised our son, where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays and anniversaries. Moses was standing next to me by the window. He'd seen the same thing. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling, needing confirmation that my eyes weren't deceiving me. "I saw it, Samantha," he replied grimly. "I saw everything." Over the next hour, I watched in growing horror as my house transformed before my eyes. Lights turned on in different rooms. First the living room, then the kitchen. And then, and this was what made my heart clench like a fist, I saw light coming from the second-floor window. The master bedroom. My bedroom. The room where David had died in my arms. The room they'd locked me out of with a changed lock and lies about moisture damage. Now I understood why they'd locked it. There was no moisture problem. There were guests. Paying guests sleeping in the most sacred space in my house. Around 7:30, a second car arrived. This time it was an Uber. I recognized the sticker in the window. 3 women got out, all in their mid-20s, laughing and talking excitedly. They had large suitcases covered in travel stickers. Zoe performed the same routine. Greeting at the door, brief conversation, exchange of cash. Welcoming gesture, door closing. By 8 o'clock, Jaden had arrived home from work. I watched him park his car in the driveway, get out with his briefcase, and walk into the house with the confident stride of a man who had nothing to hide. But he knew. Of course he knew. This operation was too organized, too smooth to be Zoe working alone. They were in this together. I counted in my head. There were at least 5 strangers in my house right now. 5 people I'd never met paying money to sleep in my home, using my electricity, my water, my space. The rage I felt at that moment was like nothing I'd experienced before. It was hot and cold at the same time, burning and freezing. It was the fury of 40 years of building a life, only to watch someone treat it like a commodity, a business opportunity, a way to make quick cash. I wanted to cross the street right then. I wanted to pound on that door and confront them in front of all those strangers. I wanted to scream at Jaden, "This is my house, how dare you!" But Moses put his hand on my shoulder, firm and grounding. "Wait, Samantha," he said quietly. "If you go now, we'll only know about the rental business. But if we wait, if we keep watching, we'll discover the whole truth. The complete magnitude of what they're doing." He was right. I knew he was right, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to act, to reclaim my territory, to fight. Instead, I took a deep breath and sat back down in that chair by the window. Through my house windows, I could see shadows moving. People I didn't know walking through rooms I'd decorated, sitting on furniture I'd chosen, living temporarily in the life I'd built. I'd never felt so violated. Not even when David died. At least then I'd known what I was facing. I'd known my enemy was death itself, impersonal and inevitable. This was different. This was betrayal by the people I loved most in the world. Moses brought me a blanket as the night grew colder. He made fresh coffee. He sat with me in companionable silence, another witness to this unfolding nightmare. Around 11 o'clock, the lights in my house began to turn off one by one. First the living room went dark, then the kitchen. The bedroom stayed lit a little longer. I could see shadows moving behind curtains as people prepared for bed. By 11:30, the house was completely dark and silent. Moses yawned and stretched. "You should try to sleep, Samantha. Tomorrow there will be more to see." But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't close my eyes knowing that strangers were sleeping in my house. So I stayed there all night, wrapped in Moses's blanket, watching my dark house like a sentinel. And I waited for Friday. I waited for midnight. I waited to discover everything. At 6 o'clock in the morning, just as the sky was turning from black to gray, the front door of my house opened. I'd been awake all night, my body stiff from sitting in the wooden chair, my eyes burning from exhaustion and the strain of watching through the darkness. But the moment I saw movement, I was alert, every sense sharp. The young couple who'd arrived first, the ones with the camera bag, came out with their suitcases. A yellow taxi was already waiting at the curb, its engine running exhaust visible in the cold morning air. They loaded their bags quickly, efficiently, like people who'd done this before. Like people who knew they needed to leave early before the neighbors were awake and watching. The taxi pulled away just as the sun was starting to rise. Half an hour later, the three young women emerged. Another Uber, another quick departure. They were laughing as they got in the car, probably talking about their night in New York, their fun girls' trip to the city. They had no idea they'd been part of an illegal operation. They probably thought they'd found a great deal on a vacation rental. By 7 o'clock, all the guests were gone. Every single one had vanished like ghosts, leaving no trace. Zoe came out to the front yard with a trash bag. She was wearing a robe over her pajamas, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd worked hard and made good money. She deposited the bag in the container by the side of the house and went back inside. Everything returned to normal. The house looked exactly as it always did, quiet, respectable, innocent. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have known what had happened in the night. Jaden left for work at 8 o'clock, dressed in his navy suit, this time his briefcase in hand. He paused to kiss Zoe goodbye on the front porch, a brief perfunctory kiss, more habit than affection. Then he got in his car and drove away to his accounting job, where he probably sat in meetings and talked about ethics and fiduciary responsibility. The hypocrisy made me sick. With Jaden gone and the guests departed, I watched Zoe's true routine emerge. She spent the entire morning cleaning. I could see her moving from room to room through the windows, carrying baskets of linens, vacuum cleaner, cleaning supplies. She was thorough and practiced. This wasn't the first time she'd done this. This was a well-established system. Around 9:30, she came out to her car with several large bags of laundry. She loaded them into the trunk of her sedan and drove away, heading to a laundromat probably. Couldn't use my washing machine for that much laundry. I would have noticed the increased water bill, the constant sound of the machine running. She was back by 11, the bags presumably now full of clean sheets and towels. I watched her make multiple trips from the car to the house, her arms full of folded linens. She was preparing, getting ready for the next wave of guests. Moses brought me lunch, chicken noodle soup, and crackers, and sat with me while I ate. "She's good at this," he observed, watching Zoe through the window as she watered the plants in the front yard. "Very organized, very professional." "She always was," I said, my voice bitter. "When she first started dating Jaden, I thought she was so impressive, so put together and ambitious. I thought she'd be good for him, help him be more successful." "You couldn't have known." "Couldn't I?" I set down my soup spoon, no longer hungry. "David used to say I was too trusting. He said I always wanted to see the best in people, even when they showed me who they really were." Moses was quiet for a moment. "Patricia used to say the same thing about me. She said I was naive about people's motivations. But Samantha, being trusting isn't a character flaw. Being trustworthy is what matters. And they're the ones who failed that test, not you." His words were kind, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest. That afternoon, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Around 3 o'clock, Zoe left the house again. This time she was dressed more formally, slacks, a blouse, heels. She got in her car and drove away. 20 minutes later, she returned. But she wasn't alone. She pulled up in front of the house with a man in the passenger seat. He was older, maybe in his mid-50s, wearing an expensive-looking suit and carrying a leather briefcase. The same man Moses had described seeing at the coffee shop. The same man who had discussed mental competency in nursing homes. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. They didn't go into the house. Instead, they walked around to the side yard toward the back. Toward the old shed, the workshop where David used to spend hours building furniture and fixing things, where his tools still hung on pegboards and sawdust still lingered in the corners. I couldn't see what they were doing back there. The angle was wrong and trees blocked my view. But they were back there for almost 15 minutes. When they emerged, the man was putting something into his briefcase. Papers, maybe. Documents. Zoe walked him back to the street. They shook hands, a professional handshake, businesslike. He got into a black Mercedes that was parked down the block and drove away. Zoe stood on the sidewalk for a moment watching him go. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. She was smiling, pleased with herself. "Moses," I said, my voice shaking. "That was him, wasn't it? The man from the coffee shop. That's him." Moses confirmed, his face grave. "Same suit, same briefcase, same expensive car. What are they planning? What documents could they possibly need that involve that shed?" Moses shook his head. "I don't know, Samantha, but we'll find out. Friday midnight, that's when you'll see everything, remember. Friday, tomorrow night." I had to wait one more day. As evening approached on Thursday, the pattern repeated. The first guests arrived around 6:30. A single man this time, maybe 40 years old, wearing business casual clothes and carrying a laptop bag. He looked like he was in town for a conference or meeting. Zoe greeted him, took his payment, showed him inside. At 7:15, another couple arrived. Older this time, maybe in their 60s, with matching suitcases and the excited energy of tourists. They were probably in New York to see shows, visit museums, walk through Central Park. They had no idea they were staying in a house where the owner had no knowledge of their presence. By 8 o'clock, there were 4 strangers in my house. I watched Jaden come home from work. I watched him park his car, walk inside, and greet the guests like they were invited friends. He shook hands with the businessman. He chatted with the older couple, probably giving them recommendations for restaurants and attractions. He was good at this. Charming, professional, friendly. The perfect host. I had raised this man. I had nursed him when he was sick, taught him to read, helped him with his homework, paid for his college education with money David and I had saved for years. I had sacrificed weekends and vacations and my own comfort to give him opportunities. And this was how he repaid me. By turning my home into a business and planning what? To have me declared incompetent. To lock me away somewhere so he could have full control. The rage was building again, hot and sharp. But beneath it was something worse. Grief. The kind of grief I'd felt when David died, but different. David's death had been natural, inevitable. This was a death too, the death of the relationship I thought I had with my son. The death of trust. The death of family. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. I'd managed to sleep a few hours in Moses's guest bed, but my dreams had been troubled, full of locked doors and voices I couldn't quite hear. I was back at the window by 7 o'clock, watching the guests depart. The same routine, early exits, quick getaways, no trace left behind. But today felt different. There was an energy in the air, a sense of anticipation. Moses felt it too. "Today's the day," he said, bringing me coffee and toast. "Whatever they're really doing, whatever the full scope is, we'll see it tonight." Around 10 o'clock, Zoe went into overdrive. She cleaned the house more thoroughly than I'd seen all week. She spent extra time in the front yard, pruning bushes, sweeping the porch, making everything look perfect. She went to the store and came back with fresh flowers, expensive ones, lilies and roses, and arranged them in vases throughout the house. I could see them through the windows, bright spots of color in my living room. She was preparing for something important, something special. Jaden came home early from work. By 5:30, he was already there, helping Zoe with final preparations. I watched them move through the house together, checking rooms, adjusting things, conferring in doorways. "They're expecting a big night," Moses observed. At exactly 7 o'clock, the parade began. First 4 people arrived together, 2 young couples traveling as a group. They had matching backpacks and the excited energy of tourists on an adventure. They spoke with accents English, but not American. British maybe, or Australian. Zoe greeted them with her most professional smile. The transaction happened quickly, cash counted, rooms assigned, welcome given. 30 minutes later, 3 middle-aged women arrived in a taxi. They were dressed for a night out, probably planning to see a Broadway show. Their laughter carried across the street, high and happy. Then an older couple, maybe in their late 60s, with expensive luggage and the careful movements of people with arthritis or other age-related pains. They reminded me of David and me in our later years, still adventurous, still wanting to see the world, but moving a little slower. Then 2 single men arriving separately, but within minutes of each other. Both carried briefcases along with their overnight bags. Business travelers, probably. I counted in my head, my stomach churning. "Moses, there are 11 people in my house right now. 11 strangers." "I know," he said quietly. 11 people occupying every available room. Using my bathrooms, sleeping in my beds, walking on my floors. The house I'd built with David was now a fully operational hotel, and I was watching from across the street like an exile from my own life. Through the windows, I could see them mingling in the living room. Zoe had set out snacks and drinks, treating it like a bed and breakfast, creating an atmosphere of hospitality. Some of the guests were talking to each other, strangers, becoming temporary friends. Others were checking their phones, planning their evening activities in the city. Jaden and Zoe moved among them like professional hosts, smiling, making recommendations, offering extra towels or pillows. They were good at this. Too good. This wasn't new for them. This was a practiced, perfected system. "How long do you think they've been doing this?" I asked Moses. He considered. "From what I've observed, I'd say at least 3 or 4 months, maybe longer. It started small, one person every week or so. Then it increased. Now on weekends it's like this. Maximum occupancy." I did the math in my head. If each person paid, say, $30 or $40 a night and they had this many people 3 nights a week, they're making thousands of dollars a month, I said, my voice hollow. Off my property, using my house, my utilities, my everything. And they haven't paid me a single cent. "Not just stealing," Moses said. "This is a systematic operation. Fraud on a major scale." The hours crawled by. At 10 o'clock, the lights in my house began to dim. The guests were settling in for the night, heading to their assigned rooms. I could see shadows moving behind curtains, the glow of phone screens, the occasional silhouette of someone getting ready for bed. By 11, the house was mostly dark. Only a few lights remained on the hallway light, which I always kept on at night, and the light in the kitchen. Jaden and Zoe were in the living room. I could see them through the front window, sitting on the couch I'd bought 15 years ago, counting money. Stacks of bills on the coffee table, their heads bent together, fingers moving through the cash with practiced efficiency. They were dividing the take, organizing their earnings, probably planning how to spend it. The sight made me want to vomit. At 11:30, they finally went to bed. The last lights went out. The house fell into complete darkness and silence. Moses had dozed off on the guest bed, exhausted from days of keeping watch with me. His soft snoring filled the small room, but I was wide awake. Every nerve in my body was alert, waiting. Moses had said midnight. Friday midnight. That's when I would discover everything. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and watched the clock on Moses's nightstand. The digital numbers glowed green in the darkness. 8:30, 40, 45, 11. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. Whatever was going to happen, whatever secret was about to be revealed, I was about to witness it. 11:55, 11:58, 11:59. And then, midnight. At exactly 12 o'clock, the side door of my house opened. The door that led from the kitchen to the backyard, the door we almost never used because the front entrance was more convenient. In 40 years, I'd probably used that door a handful of times, usually just to take out trash or water the garden from the back. A figure stepped out into the darkness. It was Zoe, dressed in dark clothing, black pants, black jacket, like she was trying to blend into the night. She stood on the back step for a moment, looking around, checking to make sure no one was watching. But I was watching. From across the street from Moses's darkened window, I was watching everything. Then a second figure emerged behind her. A man, tall, wearing dark clothes, carrying that same leather briefcase I'd seen before. The man from the coffee shop. The man who had come to meet Zoe that afternoon. They walked together across my backyard, moving quickly and quietly, their breath visible in the cold midnight air. They were heading toward the shed, David's workshop, his sanctuary, the place where he'd built the cradle for baby Jaden, where he'd restored furniture, where he'd spent countless peaceful hours. Zoe pulled out a key and unlocked the padlock on the shed door. They both went inside, and a moment later, light spilled through the small window, the work light David had installed still functioning after all these years. I could see their shadows moving inside, projected on the shed walls like a sinister puppet show. They were talking. I could see Zoe gesturing the man, nodding. Then Zoe pulled something from her jacket papers documents. She spread them out on David's old workbench. The man examined them with a small flashlight, reading carefully. He took something from his briefcase, more papers, a thick folder. Zoe reviewed them page by page. Even from this distance, I could see her nodding, see her pointing to specific sections. They were making some kind of agreement, finalizing some kind of plan. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the man put everything back in his briefcase. Zoe folded her papers and tucked them back into her jacket. They turned off the work light, plunging the shed into darkness. But they didn't go back to the house. Instead, they walked to the back fence, the wooden fence that separated my property from the alley behind. There was a small gate there installed years ago for trash pickup access. Zoe opened it with another key. The man stepped through into the alley. I heard the distant sound of a car engine starting. He must have parked back there out of sight of the street, where no neighbors would notice. Zoe closed and locked the gate. She stood there for a moment alone in the backyard of my house, and I saw her check her phone. The screen illuminated her face. She was smiling, pleased, satisfied, like someone who'd just closed an important deal. Then she walked back to the house, slipped inside through the side door, and locked it behind her. Within seconds, the house was dark and silent again, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. I turned from the window and shook Moses's shoulder urgently. Moses, wake up. I saw him. I saw everything. He sat up immediately, still groggy but alert. What happened? The man with the briefcase. He was here. Zoe met him at midnight in the shed. They reviewed documents, papers. They're planning something, Moses. Something big and something secret and something that requires midnight meetings and back alley exits. Moses rubbed his eyes and checked his watch. It's 12:30. They just left 5 minutes ago. He left through the back gate. There must be a car in the alley. He came prepared not to be seen from the street. Moses got up and came to the window looking at my dark, silent house. This is worse than we thought, Samantha. There's someone else involved. Someone professional. Someone who works in the shadows. A lawyer, I said, my voice shaking. That's what he has to be, right. A lawyer helping them with whatever they're planning. The mental competency evaluation. The nursing home. The documents to take control of my house. Moses put a hand on my shoulder. We don't know exactly what yet, but we will. You need to get into that shed, Samantha. You need to see what they're hiding there. Tomorrow, I said. While Jaden's at work and Zoe goes out, I'll go in through the back gate. I have a key. It's my property, my shed. I'll keep watch, Moses said. I'll make sure she doesn't come back while you're in there. We sat together in that dark room looking at my house, making plans to infiltrate my own property like thieves. How had it come to this? How had my life, my safe, predictable, comfortable life, turned into this nightmare? But I knew the answer. It had come to this because of greed, because of betrayal, because the people I loved most in the world valued money more than they valued me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat by the window watching, waiting for dawn. At 6 o'clock, the guests started leaving again. The same routine quiet departures, taxis and Ubers, everyone gone by 7:30. Zoe came out to take the trash to the curb. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, visible even from across the street. Running this operation was exhausting work, apparently. Good. I hoped she was miserable. Jaden left for work at 8. I watched his car disappear down the street, heading to his office where he'd spend the day pretending to be an honest, hard-working professional. At 9 o'clock, Zoe loaded laundry into her car again. Mountains of it, sheets and towels from 11 guests. She was going to be gone for at least an hour, maybe more. This was my chance. Moses, she's leaving. I'm going now. Are you sure you want to do this alone? I can come with you. No. You need to stay here and keep watch. If she comes back early, call my cell phone immediately. I'll have it on vibrate. Moses looked worried. Be careful, Samantha. If she catches you, she won't catch me. It's my house, my shed, my property. I have every right to be there. I said it with more confidence than I felt. I left through Moses's back door and walked through the quiet alley behind our houses. It was Saturday morning and the neighborhood was still sleepy. I didn't see anyone. The back gate to my property was locked just as I'd seen Zoe lock it last night. But I had the key, a copy I'd kept on my keyring for 40 years since the day David installed the gate. My hands shook as I unlocked it. The gate swung open with a soft creak that sounded deafening in the quiet morning. I stepped into my own backyard, a backyard I'd tended for decades, where David and I had barbecued in the summer and where Jaden had played as a child. Now I was entering it like a trespasser, my heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. The shed was about 20 yards from the gate. I walked quickly, staying low behind the garden bushes, even though rationally I knew no one was home to see me. The shed had a simple padlock, the same padlock David had used for years. I tried several keys on my ring before finding the right one. The lock opened with a click that seemed too loud. I pulled open the door and stepped inside. The shed smelled exactly as I remembered old wood motor oil, the faint scent of sawdust that never quite went away. David's tools still hung on the pegboard walls, organized the way he'd liked them. His workbench, scarred from years of projects, stood against the far wall. Sunlight filtered through the dusty window, creating rays in the air. Everything looked normal, untouched, like a time capsule of David's hobbies and work. But then I saw it. On the workbench there was a metal box, gray modern, completely out of place among David's old tools and equipment. It had a digital lock on the front, the kind with a number pad. I approached slowly, every sense alert. The box wasn't locked. The digital display was dark. There was just a simple latch holding it closed, 2 buttons on the sides that you pressed to release. I pressed them. Click, the box opened. And what I saw inside made my breath catch in my throat. Money. Stacks and stacks of cash. 20s, 50s, 100s, all bundled with rubber bands. I'd seen enough money in my nursing career to estimate amounts, and this was significant. $10,000 at least. Maybe more. All the money they'd earned from their illegal operation. 4 months of turning my house into a hotel. 4 months of betrayal quantified in cash. But the money wasn't the worst part. Underneath the bills were documents. I pulled them out with shaking hands and began to read. The first was a rental contract. A professional, official-looking rental agreement listing my house, my address, my property as available for short-term tourist lodging. The owner's name on the contract read Jaden Mitchell, but that was impossible. I was the legal owner. My name was on the deed, clear and unambiguous. David had left the house to me in his will. There was no ambiguity, no shared ownership. How could Jaden sign a contract claiming to be the owner I kept reading? There was a footnote in small print at the bottom, legal owner in process of transfer, documentation pending judicial procedure. Transfer, judicial procedure. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. They weren't just using my house illegally. They were planning to take it from me, legally, through the courts. The next document made everything clear. It was a medical evaluation form. Official letterhead from a private psychiatric clinic in Manhattan. The kind of place that charged thousands of dollars for assessments. Patient name, Samantha Rose Mitchell. Date of birth. My birthday. Evaluation date. 2 weeks from now. Reason for consultation. Evaluation of mental competency and decision-making autonomy. Family request due to concern about progressive cognitive decline. Progressive cognitive decline. They were going to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist. They were going to claim I was losing my mental faculties, that I couldn't take care of myself, that I needed someone else to make decisions for me. And it was all a lie. I was 64 years old, not 84. My mind was sharp. I'd worked as a nurse until my retirement 3 years ago, a job that required quick thinking, good judgment, and constant mental acuity. I managed my own finances, drove my own car, lived independently. But they were going to paint a different picture. A picture of a confused, declining old woman who needed to be protected from herself. There were more documents. A brochure from a nursing home called Golden Hope Residence. Specialized care for seniors, the cover proclaimed in cheerful letters over a photo of smiling elderly people in a sunny garden. The price list inside was highlighted $3,000 per month. Private rooms, 24-hour security, special programs for patients with dementia and cognitive decline. They'd already picked out where they were going to put me, already decided which facility would be my prison while they enjoyed my house and my money. My vision blurred with tears of rage. But the last document was the worst. It was a power of attorney. A broad, comprehensive legal document that would give Jaden complete control over everything I owned. My house, my bank accounts, my medical decisions, my entire life. The document was professionally prepared, already printed, ready to be executed. Only one thing was missing, my signature. And next to the signature line there was a handwritten note. I recognized Zoe's handwriting, neat, precise, the letters slightly rounded. The note read, Dr. Lisandro confirms he can administer mild sedative during appointment. Signature will be obtained during induced confusion state. Witnesses already coordinated. Additional cost, $5,000. I read that note 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my consciousness, like stones dropping into dark water. They were going to drug me. They were going to take me to this Dr. Lisandro, this corrupt psychiatrist who was willing to participate in elder abuse for $5,000. He was going to give me a sedative, something to confuse me to make me disoriented and suggestible. And while I was in that chemically induced state, they were going to put this power of attorney in front of me and have me sign it. I wouldn't understand what I was signing. I wouldn't be in my right mind. But it would be legal. On paper, it would look completely legitimate. There would be witnesses, paid witnesses already coordinated, who would testify that I was lucid and understood what I was doing. And once they had that power of attorney, I would have no rights, no control, no autonomy. They could sell my house, empty my bank accounts, make all my medical decisions. And the ultimate goal, the end of their plan, they could commit me to Golden Hope residence against my will. I would be locked in a nursing home, declared mentally incompetent, stripped of everything I'd built in 64 years of life. And it would all be legal, all documented, all approved by courts and doctors and lawyers. And Jaden and Zoe would have everything. The house David and I built, the money we saved, the life we created. I sat down on David's old work stool, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Moses. "She's leaving the laundromat 10 minutes out. Get out of there now." I couldn't move. I was frozen, the document still in my trembling hands, the full horror of their plan washing over me in waves. They'd thought of everything, every detail, every contingency. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a desperate act. This was calculated, systematic, and sophisticated. My phone vibrated again. "Samantha, leave now." That got me moving. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Every document, every page, every note. My hands were shaking so badly that some of the photos came out blurry, but I kept shooting, making sure I captured everything. Then I put the documents back in the box exactly as I'd found them. The money on the bottom, the papers on top, arranged in the same order. I closed the box, made sure the latch was secure. I took one last look around the shed, David's sanctuary, now corrupted by my son's greed, and I stepped outside, locked the padlock, walked quickly back to the gate, through the alley, into Moses's backyard. I made it inside his house just as I heard Zoe's car pulling up in front of my house. Moses was waiting in the kitchen, his face pale with worry. "Did you get what you needed?" he asked. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and showed him my phone, swiping through the photos I'd taken. He looked at each image, his expression growing darker and darker. When he reached the note about the sedative, about obtaining my signature during induced confusion state, he looked up at me with horror in his eyes. "My God, Samantha, this is planned kidnapping. This is systematic elder abuse. This is criminal conspiracy." "I know," I whispered. "You need to call your lawyer. Right now. Today." "I will. I have a friend, Ellen. We've known each other for 30 years. She specializes in family law." Moses gripped my shoulders gently. "Samantha, they're planning to drug you and steal your entire life. We can't wait. We need to act now." I looked at the photos on my phone, the evidence of everything they'd planned, everything they were willing to do to me, their own mother, their own family. And I felt something shift inside me. The grief and the shock were still there, but underneath was something harder, something stronger. Rage, pure crystalline rage, the kind of anger that doesn't burn hot and chaotic, but cold and focused. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a confused old woman who could be manipulated and controlled. They thought they could take everything from me, and I would never know, never fight back. They were wrong. "Call Ellen," Moses said again. I pulled up her number on my phone. It was time to fight back. Ellen answered on the third ring, even though it was Saturday morning. "Samantha, is everything all right?" Her voice, warm, familiar, tinged with immediate concern, almost broke me. For 48 hours, I'd been holding myself together through sheer force of will. Now, hearing the voice of my oldest friend, I felt the dam start to crack. "Ellen, I need help. Legal help. And I need it now." There was a pause. Then her voice changed sharper, more focused. This was Ellen, the lawyer now, not Ellen, the friend. "Tell me everything." So I did. Standing in Moses's kitchen with my phone pressed to my ear, I told her about the whispers, the locked room, the midnight guests, the illegal rental operation. I told her about Moses seeing Zoe with the man at the coffee shop, about the words he'd overheard. And then I told her about the shed, about the box, about the documents and the money and the plan. When I got to the part about Dr. Lissandro and the sedative about obtaining my signature during induced confusion state, Ellen's sharp intake of breath was audible. Samantha, this is, Jesus Christ, this is conspiracy to commit fraud. This is planned elder abuse. This is document falsification and attempted kidnapping. With the evidence you have, we can stop them, but you need to act fast. The medical appointment is in 2 weeks, I said, my voice steadier now. That's when they're planning to do it. Which means they'll be accelerating everything. Listen to me carefully. First, don't return to that house yet. Stay where you are. You're safe at Moses's. Yes. Good. Tomorrow, Sunday, I need you to come to my office. I'm calling in a notary I trust, Henry Castellano. We're going to create legal documents to protect your assets immediately. Can you be there at 10 in the morning? I'll be there. Second, on Monday, we file a formal complaint with the police and the district attorney. I'll prepare all the documentation tonight. Third, she paused. Third, we're going to set a trap for them. A trap? They think you don't know anything. They think you're still in Boston, trusting and naive. That's your advantage. We're going to use it. Moses drove me to Ellen's office in downtown Manhattan the next morning. It was in a modest building near the courthouse, the kind of place that served working people rather than corporations. The waiting room had worn leather chairs and outdated magazines, but Ellen's office itself was lined with law books and framed certificates that spoke to her expertise. She hugged me when I came in, a real hug, the kind between friends who've known each other for 3 decades. We're going to fix this, Sam, she whispered. I promise you. Henry Castellano arrived 10 minutes later. He was a stocky man in his 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. He shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm very sorry for what you're going through, but I want you to know that when we finish today, your son won't be able to touch a single cent of your estate without facing immediate criminal charges. Over the next 3 hours, I signed documents. So many documents. Ellen explained each one with patience, making sure I understood exactly what I was signing. This is a revocable power of attorney that specifically names me as your attorney in fact and explicitly revokes any power that might exist now or in the future in Jaden's name. This makes it legally impossible for him to act on your behalf. Sign. This is a declaration of mental competency. Tomorrow you're meeting with Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic psychologist I know and trust. She'll evaluate you and provide a professional certification that you're of sound mind. This document will be filed with the court. Sign. This is a new will. It replaces any previous versions. It specifically excludes Jaden from inheritance due to fraudulent actions against you, and it names your sister Anne as primary beneficiary. There's a provision for your granddaughter Lily, a trust fund that Jaden can't touch. I paused at this one. There's a granddaughter I didn't mention. Your sister told me. Anne said Jaden has a 13-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. She thought you'd want to protect her even if you're cutting Jaden out. Lily. I'd only met her twice. Jaden had kept her largely separate from me after the custody arrangement with his ex-wife. But she was innocent in all this. A child. Yes, I said. Protect Lily. Sign. And this last one is a protective order that we'll file with the judge tomorrow. It legally prevents Jaden and Zoe from accessing your property, your financial accounts, or making any decisions regarding your care or assets. Sign. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, like building a wall between me and their plans. When we finished, Henry gathered all the documents into a leather portfolio. These will be filed first thing Monday morning. By noon, your assets will be legally protected. Now, Ellen said, leaning forward with her elbows on her desk, let's talk about the trap. You need to go home, Ellen said. Not today. Tomorrow night, Monday. You need to return as if nothing happened. As if you really were in Boston all week. My stomach clenched. Go back there. Act normal. I know it's hard, but Samantha, if they suspect you know anything, they'll change their plans. They might accelerate. They might get desperate and do something unpredictable. Right now, they think they're winning. We need to keep them thinking that. Moses, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. What about the illegal rental operation? Can we use that? Ellen nodded. I've already contacted the Municipal Housing Authority. An inspector named Carlos Rodriguez will be conducting a surprise visit to Samantha's house. I told him Wednesday or Thursday this week. Why not sooner? I asked. Because we need time for you to reestablish normalcy. You come home Monday night. Tuesday and Wednesday, you act completely natural. Then, Thursday night, that's when they usually have the most guests, right? Moses, Thursday through Saturday, Moses confirmed. Those are the big nights. Perfect. The inspector will arrive Thursday evening around 9 o'clock when the house is full of paying guests. Living evidence of their illegal operation. If everything goes according to plan, the business gets shut down, they receive heavy fines, and we have additional criminal evidence to support your case. And Dr. Lissandro? I asked. The psychiatrist who's willing to drug me. Ellen's smile was cold. I've been researching him all morning. Dr. Marcus Lissandro has a very interesting history. He's been investigated twice by the State Medical Board for unethical practices. Both times he barely escaped license suspension. With your evidence, that handwritten note from Zoe about the sedative, we can initiate a formal investigation that will actually stick. He'll lose his medical license and face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. So we're not just stopping Jaden and Zoe, Moses said slowly. We're dismantling the entire network. Exactly. The corrupt doctor, the illegal business, everything. They built a house of cards, and we're going to knock it down. But, Ellen looked at me seriously. Samantha, for this to work, you have to be an actress. For the next few days, you have to be the trusting mother who suspects nothing. Can you do that? I thought about Jaden and Zoe sitting at my dining room table counting their illegal money. I thought about that note in the shed planning to drug me into confusion. I thought about the nursing home brochure with its cheerful lies. I can do it, I said. Moses drove me to the corner of my street at 7 o'clock Monday evening. The sun had already set, and the October air was cold enough to see my breath. You sure about this? He asked, his hand on my shoulder. I'm sure. Thank you, Moses, for everything. I'll be watching from my window. If anything feels wrong, if they do anything that scares you, you call me immediately. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. I got out of the car with my suitcase and walked the last block to my house alone. Every step felt surreal, returning to my own home like a stranger armed with knowledge they didn't know I had, playing a role in a drama that could determine the rest of my life. I rang the doorbell, footsteps inside. The door opened. Jaden stood there, genuine surprise on his face. Mom, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I smiled, the warm, slightly tired smile of a woman returning from a trip. I decided to come back a day early. I missed my house. I missed my own bed. Zoe appeared behind him, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flash across her face. Annoyance, calculation, but then her professional smile locked into place. Samantha, welcome home. How was Boston? How's Anne? Wonderful. I lied, stepping into my own foyer like a guest. She spoiled me terribly, but you know there's no place like home. They brought my suitcase to my room. Zoe made tea. We sat in the living room, my living room with its furniture. I'd chosen its photos of David and me on the walls, and they asked about my trip. I'd prepared for this. Anne and I had spent an hour on the phone yesterday creating a fictional narrative. I told them about restaurants we'd supposedly visited, about walks through Boston Common, about conversations we'd had. Jaden and Zoe listened and nodded and smiled, and behind their eyes I could see it relief. Relief that I'd returned without suspicion. Relief that their secret was still safe. The house looks wonderful, I said, glancing around. You took such good care of it. Zoe responded quickly, too quickly. Of course, we cleaned everything, watered, the garden, kept everything just as you like it. You cleaned it, I thought, to erase evidence of the dozen strangers who slept here while I was gone. It even smells different, I added casually. Like new cleaning products. A micro-expression of panic in Zoe's eyes, gone in an instant. Oh yes, we did a deep cleaning. Wanted everything perfect for your return. Liar. You cleaned to hide your crimes. I sipped my tea and chatted about small things, the weather, Jaden's work, Zoe's upcoming lunch with a friend. All the while my heart was pounding, but my face remained calm. Pleasant. Unsuspecting. I was a better actress than I'd thought. Tuesday morning I woke in my own bed for the first time in a week. The familiar ceiling, the morning light through my curtains, the sounds of my house waking up around me. But nothing felt the same. I was seeing everything through new eyes, now the eyes of someone who knew the truth. I made coffee in the kitchen, David's wedding gift pot still working after 40 years. Jaden came down for breakfast, already dressed for work in his charcoal suit. Morning, Mom. Sleep okay? Like a baby. I lied. It's good to be home. He kissed the top of my head, absently grabbed toast, rushed out to his car. playing the busy professional, the dutiful son. After he left, Zoe and I had breakfast together. She was scrolling through her phone, probably managing her illegal rental calendar, confirming bookings. "Any plans today?" I asked innocently. "Oh, just errands. Grocery shopping, dry cleaning, the usual." She smiled at me. "You must be tired from traveling. Why don't you rest today? I can handle everything." "That's sweet of you, dear. I think I will take it easy." I spent the day in my house, reacquainting myself with my space. I sat in David's favorite chair in the living room reading. I tended to my garden, pulling a few weeds, deadheading the late-season roses. I did normal things, comfortable things. All the while I was hyper-aware of Zoe's movements. She did go grocery shopping, came back with bags full of food. But I noticed she also made several phone calls, speaking in low voices, always walking away when I came near. Managing her business. Confirming Thursday night's guests, probably. That evening after dinner, I retreated to my room early. "I'm still a bit tired from the trip," I told them. "I think I'll read and go to sleep early." "Of course, Mom. Rest well." But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening. Around 11 o'clock, I heard their voices from their bedroom. I got up, silently moved to my door, opened it just a crack. Their door was slightly open too. Their voices carried in the quiet house. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Jaden's voice tense with worry. "No." Zoe's voice was confident, dismissive. "She suspects nothing. She's the same as always. Trusting, gullible. The plan is still on track." "And Dr. Lissandro, everything's confirmed. The appointment is Friday of next week. We'll tell her it's a routine checkup. By the time she realizes what she signed, it'll be too late. We'll have complete control." My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "And after that?" Jaden asked. "After that, we commit her to Golden Hope. We'll visit once a month to keep up appearances. And this house," Zoe's voice took on a satisfied tone, "this house becomes completely ours." I closed my door silently and went back to my bed. I'd heard enough. Ellen was right, they thought they were winning. They had no idea the trap was closing around them. Wednesday passed in artificial normalcy. I made breakfast. I read the newspaper. I called Anne and chatted about nothing important, knowing Jaden and Zoe might be listening. In the afternoon, Zoe went out. Through the window, I saw her car leave. My phone buzzed. A text from Ellen. "Inspector confirmed for tomorrow 9 p.m. Police will be on standby 2 blocks away. Stay in your room when he arrives." My heart rate spiked. Tomorrow night, everything would change. Another text from Moses. "I'll be watching. You're not alone." That evening, Zoe showed me a brochure over dinner. "Samantha, I found this health center that offers free preventive checkups for people over 60. How about we take you next Friday? It's completely free. They have a program for seniors." Free. They were going to pay $5,000 to Dr. Lissandro for that free checkup. I feigned interest. "A checkup? Well, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I haven't been to a doctor in a while." Zoe's face lit up with relief. "Excellent. I've already made an appointment for 10 o'clock. I'll drive you." "That's so thoughtful of you, dear." She had no idea I'd already seen the appointment paperwork in that box. Had no idea I knew every detail of her plan. That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow night, the inspector would come. Tomorrow night, the first domino would fall. Thursday morning felt electric. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation. I went through my routine coffee breakfast small talk. Jaden left for work at 8:30. Zoe went into high gear. She spent the entire day preparing the house, deep cleaning every room, changing sheets, arranging fresh flowers, expensive ones. I noticed lilies and roses in vases throughout the living room and dining room. She was preparing for her biggest night. Maximum occupancy. Maximum profit. Around 4 o'clock, she went to the store and came back with bags of snacks and drinks. Setting up like this was a bed and breakfast, creating an atmosphere of hospitality for her illegal guests. Jaden came home early at 5:30 instead of his usual 7. He helped Zoe with final preparations, checking rooms, arranging furniture, making everything perfect. They had no idea I was watching every move. No idea that in just a few hours, everything they'd built would collapse. At 6:30, I was in my room when I heard the doorbell. I moved to my window. I had a partial view of the front entrance from here. A car had pulled up. 4 people got out, 2 young couples with backpacks. They looked European, speaking to each other in what sounded like German. Zoe greeted them at the door with her professional smile. I saw the transaction cash counted quickly pocketed. Then they were inside. 7 o'clock, 3 middle-aged women arrived in a taxi, laughing, dressed for a night out. 7:30, an older couple with expensive luggage. 8 o'clock, 2 men separately, but within minutes of each other, both carrying briefcases. Business travelers. I counted silently. 11 people. 11 strangers in my house. My phone showed 8:45. 15 minutes. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a firm, authoritative knock on the door. I was in my room, but I could hear everything. The house had good acoustics, something David had always been proud of. "Who is it?" Jaden's voice slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Municipal Housing Inspector. I need you to open the door, please." A pause. A heavy-weighted pause. Then the sound of the door opening. "Inspector, is there some problem?" Jaden's voice was trying for calm, but failing. "We received a complaint about an illegal lodging operation at this address. I need to inspect the property." The inspector's voice was professional and flexible. "There must be a mistake." Zoe's voice now higher than usual. "This is a private residence. We don't operate any business. Then you won't mind if I verify. I have an inspection order signed by Judge Martinez. If you refuse entry, I'll return with police and a search warrant." Another pause. I imagined Jaden and Zoe looking at each other, trapped. "Of course, Inspector. Please come in." I heard footsteps entering. Multiple footsteps. The inspector hadn't come alone. "How many people reside here permanently?" the inspector asked. 3. My mother, my wife, and me." Jaden's voice was shaking now. "And these people?" A pause. The inspector must be looking at the guests in the living room. They're friends. Friends visiting." Zoe trying to improvise. I heard the inspector moving through the house. Doors opening. Questions being asked. Then I heard him talking to one of the guests, the voice carried up the stairs. "Are you a friend of the family, sir?" "No, officer. I reserved a room online. Paid $35 for the night." Silence. A crushing, damning silence. I heard the inspector's assistant there was definitely more than one person taking photographs. Documenting everything. "Room 1 occupied by 2 non-residents. Room 2 occupied by 3 non-residents. Room 3 occupied by 1 non-resident." Each statement was another nail in their coffin. Then I heard the inspector's voice, cold and official. "According to Municipal Code Section 47B, operating a commercial lodging business without permits constitutes a serious violation. The fine is $10,000. Additionally, the tax authority will be notified about undeclared income. And since this property is registered to a pause, papers rustling, Samantha Rose Mitchell, who has not authorized any commercial activity, this also constitutes fraudulent use of someone else's property." This was my cue. I opened my bedroom door and walked out. I descended the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. Every eye in the living room turned toward me. The guests confused and uncomfortable. The inspector and his assistant professional and alert. And Jaden and Zoe, their faces draining of all color. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I am Samantha Mitchell. I own this property." The inspector nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Mitchell, did you authorize the operation of a lodging business on your property?" I paused, looking directly at Jaden, then at Zoe. "No, Inspector. I authorized nothing. In fact, I only discovered this situation a few days ago." "Mom," Zoe started toward me, her hand reaching out. "I can explain." I held up my hand, stopping her. "I don't want explanations, Zoe. Not now." I turned back to the inspector. "What happens next?" "The guests will need to vacate immediately. 30 minutes to gather their belongings. Your son and daughter-in-law will receive formal notice of violation and will need to appear before the municipal judge next week. I've also notified the police. There are 2 officers outside if additional assistance is needed." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Guests hurriedly packing some demanding refunds. Zoe had to return cash under the inspector's watchful eye. Jaden sat frozen on the couch, unable to speak or move, watching his illegal empire crumble. When the last guest left, when the inspector handed me the official report and departed, the house fell into a terrible silence. Just the 3 of us remained. I stood by the window. Jaden sat on the couch, his head in his hands. Zoe stood near the door, arms crossed, looking like a cornered animal. It was Zoe who broke the silence, her voice desperate, no longer sweet or calculated. "Mom, I know this looks bad, but we had reasons. Debts. We were drowning financially. Reasons. I turned to her and my voice was ice. Debts were sufficient justification to turn my home into an illegal business without my consent. We were going to tell you eventually. Before what? I interrupted. Before you drugged me and made me sign a fraudulent power of attorney. The silence that followed was absolute. Zoe turned white. Jaden's head jerked up, his eyes wide with shock. How? Jaden's voice broke. How do you know? Because I was never in Boston, I said quietly. I was across the street at Moses's house, watching, discovering every detail of your vile, calculated plan. I walked to the center of the living room looking at both of them. I know about the illegal rental business. I know about the cash hidden in the shed. I know about Dr. Lissandro. I know about the appointment where you planned to sedate me. I know about the power of attorney you wanted to force me to sign. And I know about Golden Hope Residence where you planned to lock me away. Zoe shook her head frantically. No, we were just exploring options because we were worried about your health. Stop the lies. The shout tore from my throat, surprising even me. I found the documents, Zoe. I read the note in your handwriting. Mild sedative during appointment. Signature obtained during induced confusion. Those were your exact words. Zoe's face crumbled. No more mask, no more pretense. I turned to Jaden. And you whom I raised, whom I loved, to whom I gave everything your father and I could give. How could you? He had tears streaming down his face. Mom, the financial situation was desperate. $30,000 in debt. We thought if we could just get control of the house. Your solution was to betray me, to steal my freedom, my dignity, my entire life. It wasn't going to go that far, Jaden whispered. I never would have. I heard your conversation, I said. Monday night, I heard you planning exactly that. Heard you say you'd visit me once a month to keep up appearances. Heard you turn me into an obstacle to be managed. Jaden collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing. I took a breath, steadying myself. Tomorrow is Friday. You had planned to take me to Dr. Lissandro at 10 o'clock. That's not happening. What is happening is this: you're going to pack your things and leave my house. You have until tomorrow at noon. You're evicting us. Zoe's voice was shrill. Where are we supposed to go? You should have thought of that before you betrayed me. You have family, friends. Figure it out. Mom, please. Jaden stood reaching for me. I stepped back. You have $10,000 in that box in the shed. The money you stole using my property. Use it for a deposit, though you'll probably need it for lawyers and fines. Zoe turned to me and all pretense was gone. Only venom remained. Fine, we'll leave your precious house. But we'll get a lawyer. We'll fight this. I smiled without warmth. Go ahead, Zoe. My lawyer has photographic evidence of every fraudulent document, every criminal plan, every detail. Do you really want to go to court with that? Her face fell as she finally understood she was completely, utterly defeated. One more thing, I said. My lawyer has already filed documents revoking any power of attorney, filed a mental competency certification, and filed a new will where Jaden is specifically excluded as heir. Jaden looked up. You disinherited me. What did you expect that I'd reward you for trying to destroy me? The rest is aftermath. They left Friday morning with their suitcases. Jaden left the keys on the entrance table. No apology, no goodbye, just empty eyes and silence. The municipal fine stood. Dr. Lissandro lost his medical license after the investigation Ellen initiated. The medical board found 2 other elderly patients he'd similarly exploited. Ellen asked me if I wanted to file criminal charges against Jaden and Zoe. I thought about it for weeks. Part of me wanted them to pay fully, but the part of me that was still a mother couldn't bear the thought of my son in prison. Just the civil case, I told Ellen. Let them live with what they did. That's punishment enough. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my house, truly my house now. I hired professionals to cleanse it, painted the walls in new colors, bought new furniture to replace what strangers had used. I converted the master bedroom into an art studio. I'd always wanted to paint, and now I have the time and peace to do it. Moses is still my neighbor, my dearest friend. We have dinner together twice a week. He helped me install a security system not because I'm afraid, but because I value my privacy now more than ever. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Jaden and Zoe divorced. He's working construction, paying off debts, slowly living in a small apartment alone. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from him. Pages of apology, of regret, of explanations that explained nothing. He ended it with, "I loved you, I love you, and I'm sorry." I keep the letter in a drawer. I'm not ready to answer. Maybe I never will be. But I couldn't throw it away either. My therapist says forgiveness isn't for the person who hurt you, it's for yourself to free yourself from the weight of hatred. I'm working on that. Slowly, painfully, but I'm also learning who I am again. Not just mother or widow or victim. I'm Samantha. I survived. I fought back. I won. That night as I prepare for bed in my quiet safe house, I look at myself in the mirror. I see a 64-year-old woman with more wrinkles than before, with sadder but wiser eyes. I see a survivor. I whisper to my reflection, love can be the perfect disguise for a trap, but self-love is the strongest shield against any betrayal. I turn off the light and lie down in my bed in my house under my roof. Alone, yes. Hurt, certainly, but free. Owner of my destiny. And that after everything is enough.